Hi, I'm Kat. Nice to meet you. Super excited to be here. What's interesting is I haven't had the opportunity to speak on this topic, but I now have two events this week, one tonight and a Twitter chat tomorrow. So it's pretty cool that it's all packed in. And then I'm attending a networking event in France this weekend for blockchain. And one of the questions they ask in a survey to make sure that they divide the room up appropriately for dinner is, do you consider yourself a feminist? So it's like boom, 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 like you gotta reflect on this now and figure this out. So it's been an exciting week. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of SimplyVital Health. And a little bit about my background. Born and raised Dallas, Texas. Been in Connecticut for about 7 years now. I went to Austin College. When I went to Austin College, it's a really well-known school in Texas for becoming a physician. My mom was a teacher, my grandmother was a teacher, and when you're a kid, you usually think about like the three opportunities of growing up, which is like lawyer, doctor, or something else. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I just thought I wanted to be a physician. I had a really great experience with an orthopedic physician when I was in 4th grade. I broke my ankle, and he said I was never going to play soccer again, which was completely devastating. We worked together to fix that, and I just thought that he walked on water. So I said, I too want to be a physician, and just carried that through. And it was not until my senior year of college, worst time to change and make a decision, when I was in the rainforest of Ecuador doing clinical rotations, and I was like, yeah, this is not that fun. Like Spanish clinical rotations, super challenging, this is awesome, but I'm really bored. And so what I started to realize is that what I was more interested in is actually the administration of healthcare. So being a physician is fantastic, but the lens that I saw it in is for my personality is that it was just very repetitive, and I needed something that was changing every day, every second, every minute. So I said, hospital administration is exactly what I want to do. I want to focus on public health, where the denominator is millions instead of one at a time. When you're a senior in college, you make that decision, you've already missed all of your grad school applications. So I was lucky that I had met Wendy Kopp, the CEO of Teach for America, the year before. At Austin College, we had given her a leadership award. And I had the opportunity to interview her and sit down and have dinner with her, and just was completely blown away by her organization, her vision. Both mom and grandmother were teachers. It was a perfect fit. So since I had spent some time in Ecuador and Costa Rica, the Latino population, specifically around how diabetes affects the Latino population, was a very strong interest of mine. And so in Teach for America, you get to rank 50 locations. You have to rank every single one of them. And I was told by the recruiter that you can't go to the Rio Grande Valley, which is along the Texas-Mexico border, if you're not fluent in Spanish. And I said, well, that's ridiculous. Like, I can learn it, or this doesn't make sense. They speak English there too, this is Texas. And so in the application, I ranked Houston first, but everywhere I could put, I said, I would prefer to go to the Texas-Mexico border. I would prefer, just put me there. I'm only ranking Houston because you told me to. And so I was able to go to the Texas-Mexico border, which is a fascinating community. Grew up in Texas my whole life. I didn't even know that there was a community down along the border. One of the most impoverished areas of our nation. It's the 5th poorest region in the nation. Some of my students didn't have roofs on their houses, electricity, water, running water, rocks leading up to their houses, but we still made really, really strong gains in our classroom. When I was in Teach for America, I was really fascinated with how they use data to drive their decisions. Every single decision that you make as a teacher in the classroom is run by some sort of analytics. So I had, being a type A personality, which we've already talked about, a dashboard on my students. Red, yellow, green. I knew exactly where they stood on each specific objective so that I could pinpoint exactly what they needed to focus on and how I could tailor my instruction for them. And so since I knew I wanted to go back to healthcare, I said, wouldn't this be great if physicians had something like this where they could work with their patients and say, I know specifically that this is where you sit with your A1C levels. This is where we need to target your care. So hold that in your brain just for a moment. Met my now husband. He took me all the way up to Connecticut, and I said, finally, I can now get my master's in public health. I got a full ride at UConn. I was able to do research with them, went into some of the poorest communities in Connecticut, did research with preschool parents. We were assessing their perception of sugar-sweetened beverages. So it was a control study. We would educate them in 30-second bites on either food safety or sugar-sweetened beverages to try to see how that would change their perception of sugar-sweetened beverages. it didn't help. So it had an immediate effect, but then after 3 months, they reverted back to their old habits. So still an impactful study. While I was at UConn, found Community Health Center, Inc., which is one of the most technologically advanced community health centers I've ever been a part of. They were on an electronic medical record first. They ran analytics first. They have their first APRN residency program. And while I was there, on the first day, they said, "Welcome. We need you to fix our Pap smear compliance. Can you do that?" And I was like, "Sure. Let's get started. Can I see your data?" And reverting back to Teach for America, they said, "We don't have any data." And so literally culling through data, raw data from the electronic medical record, and pinpointing exactly, figuring out where they were compliant and non-compliant on Pap smears, we realized that a lot of their non-compliance was actually just because they weren't entering the data correctly. So we immediately shot up from like 33 to 73% compliance because we fixed that. But then what we did is we said, wouldn't it be great if there was a red, yellow, green dashboard so that when your patients came in, you could figure out how to strategically plan for their day and your day and connect them to the care that they need. So they now use that platform every morning for rounding on their patients. They have a pod system where the physician, nurse, behavioral health physician, and dentist all rotate on the same patients. They use the platform and they figure out, here are our highest need patients, our red patients, this is exactly what they need, and they pinpoint care and they start making those calls right away. So from that, I was recruited to go to Yale New Haven. Being a high achiever, I was finally here, 6th largest hospital in the nation, really excited to be here as a strategic planner. Lots of data analytics, and in the 6 months, I just lost interest very quickly. I moved through my work really quickly. It was at that point that I said I should really stop and reflect and figure out where I'm going. You're at a very good, top-performing hospital. If you're not satisfied here, what is it that you're missing? So that was May 2014. 6 months thereafter, I went on a 1.5-year problem-finding search in healthcare because I realized that the most content time of my life was right here. And in those two areas of my life in particular is where you have the most autonomy. So in college, you have a lot of autonomy. The harder you work, the more it's going to pay off. In Teach for America, the harder that I worked in the classroom with my students, the more it paid off. So I started to realize that I had a very entrepreneurial perspective and drive. So 1.5 years, 120 to 200 interviews later, we pinpointed exactly what we wanted to do, and that's SimplyVital Health. So what does SimplyVital Health do? So as a strategic planner, I learned a lot about value-based care. If you're in healthcare, you know this term. It's a hashtag term. It's a hot term. But basically what it means is that we're shifting into where reimbursement is based on quality and outcomes of health as opposed to just volume, how many procedures you do. If you actually read some of the value-based care law, which is highly riveting, it's the best thing to do before you go to sleep. I read all of MACRA. You start to see that what's happening is actually they're starting to require coordination between physicians, and they're starting to require a focus on sharing data. That story that Sally shared where physicians are not sharing data among each other is very real, and I guarantee all of us have had that experience, and if not us personally, someone in our family. But what I realized in the 1.5 years of problem finding in healthcare is sharing data is not a technology issue, it's a business issue. So there has to be some sort of financial incentive to share the data, which is why value-based care is so exciting. So that's where we focus, specifically on bundled payments, which is essentially just a capped reimbursement for an episode. So if you think of a hip replacement, anyone that's in a bundled payment, they're going to get a cap, say $30,000. If the care of that patient over this specific period of time is more than $30,000, it's a financial penalty. If it's less, it's a savings. So what that does is it encourages them to start coordinating data outside of clinical affiliations. You're not just sticking with Cornell. You have to talk to the skilled nursing facilities, you have to talk to home health, primary care. So all of this coordination is happening. And so we sit right on top of that. But we also use a really cool technology, blockchain. How many have heard about blockchain? Oh, yes! Sweet! All right, so if you have any questions, just reach out. It's super exciting. When I was problem finding in healthcare, I couldn't get away from blockchain because it found me. And so I started to read it. I dug in. If there's a white paper, I read it. If there's any sort of analysis on it, I read it. And it's a very, very exciting technology for healthcare. It's going to be a while before we see complete change, just like cloud, just like electronic medical records, but it's going to get there. It's not sexy, but here are the 3 main points about blockchain to impress all your buddies at your next party. So first is immutability. And what that means is that whatever's on the blockchain or whatever touches the blockchain is therefore immutable, which means it cannot be deleted or changed. It is set in stone, which sounds worse than it actually is. The next is security. When you talk about data sharing and you talk about data silos, there's a huge issue around security. What happens with digital healthcare companies right now today, including ours, is your data sits in 1,000 places where you cannot track. Every time a healthcare digital company starts, your data now sits in a brand new silo. That's really, really risky because that means your healthcare data can be compromised in a lot of different locations that you can't protect. The third is encryption. Anything that touches the blockchain, anything that works in the blockchain, fancy word called cryptography, all it is a series of numbers and letters. So anything that works with the blockchain is encrypted. Really, really great for audit trails. Anyone in health insurance here? Yes. So you have to deal a lot with audit trails. So our first implementation of blockchain is tracking exactly where that patient is going in an immutable way to prove that they work together. Data access, sharing data. Instead of creating silos, we can actually use in our protocol a key pair system, which was actually implemented at Beth Israel by our advisor, which is the CIO of Beth Israel. It was an MIT project. And just using a key pair ID, you and I can share data without creating a silo. The data actually sits in its own server, all sorts of magic that happens, and then you can actually gain access to that data. So your physicians can start sharing data without having to worry about another data silo in the middle. Nexus supply chain. Had no idea that counterfeit prescriptions is a massive issue in Africa. So what you can do with blockchain is you can actually track that ID, which will go all the way back to the origination of that pill. You can see exactly where it went to make sure that it's not counterfeit. Last is smart contracts, which is just a fancy way of saying an automatic contract. This is what we're really excited about. So with health insurance, this is not going to disrupt your business, but it's going to disrupt parts of your business. So this is something that you really want to focus on. With a smart contract, what you can do, what we're doing with bundled payments, is you can actually code this contract to execute automatically. So as that patient is moving through their care, that payment can actually be distributed instead of someone actually having to manually push that button. So this is going to have a huge impact. So blockchain on a macro level, not going to see very much. On a micro level, you're going to start seeing very tiny disruptions with very, very important business models in healthcare. So we're creating Health Nexus. Bitcoin, Ethereum, familiar? Yes. Bitcoin, Silk Road? Yeah. Bitcoin blockchain. No one's going to use it in healthcare because it's tainted by Silk Road. Essentially what Silk Road is, so blockchain, everything can be totally, you can't even tell who did the transaction. It's totally clear. No identity whatsoever. Username, but no personal identification. Really great way for a black market to sell drugs. That is exactly how Bitcoin was used, very successfully. So Bitcoin is now tainted, so we can cross that off the list, because as soon as I sit down at a table with an ITS team at a hospital and I have to explain that I'm using Bitcoin blockchain, and they're like, whoa, 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 we're in like prescription drugs, not fake drugs, then it's already, like, we can't even have that conversation. So we can't use Bitcoin. Ethereum blockchain, if you're familiar with how, so if you think about your computer and how your computer runs, it has its own energy system, its own server, and that's how it powers itself with an electricity cord. Blockchain runs on servers all across the globe. They're what powers it. But with the Ethereum blockchain, we have no idea where those servers sit, except for we do know that 51% sit in China. So have that conversation with an ITS department hospital, and they'll feel really uncomfortable pretty quickly. So that's why we're creating a brand new blockchain that's safely adoptable by healthcare. And what that means is instead of servers sitting in China, servers will start sitting here in the United States, and they're HIPAA compliant. So all of us that have digital healthcare companies, if you're at a hospital and you have a HIPAA compliant server, this is a brand new revenue stream for you because you can actually power a blockchain and we can all make it run together. So it's super, super exciting. Now to talk a little bit about, that's my background, that's what we're doing, talk about blockchain for hours. But let's shift a little bit more to the topic at hand, which is the Shi Economy and being a woman in business and life. And I categorize this into 4 shapes because this has been my personal journey. I will say that I've been very lucky in my experience. I have a couple of pretty bad war stories, but not as bad as some of the others that have surfaced. So I'm unfortunate that I have to consider myself lucky, but I do consider myself lucky. So my perspective is based on clinical middle management, clinical customers, investors traditional, investors crypto. Let's take you through this here. Okay, so when I was working at Yale New Haven, I only worked with women, only, until I had created and prepared my analyses and I took them to the senior VP table in the C-suite, and it was all men, which is fine. I grew up with 2 brothers. I connect really, really well with them. We actually connected on the first day. We have very similar hobbies. So I perform very well in that environment. I thrive in that environment. My mom's a single mom, so she kind of had the mother-father dual mentality. So for me, it works really, really well. And I never really noticed it until people started talking about these are the struggles that we see. This is what's happening for women in professional organizations. So when I was working at Yale, it wasn't a big deal. But now when I step out and I realize what the leadership looks like in healthcare specifically, clinical healthcare, not digital health, it's a bit different. Clinical healthcare, your hospitals, your physician groups, your skilled nursing facilities. At the middle level, a lot of women, which is awesome. But as soon as you get to that top tier, it's kind of like I guess you can call it a glass ceiling, but it's some sort of barrier that we haven't quite been able to push through yet. Now, this affects me when I'm selling, because I sell to that top tier. Now, for me personally, again, I can usually connect really well with them. Conversation flows. It's pretty easy. But I started to notice that a lot of my conversations, there were just a lot of men at the table. And it makes it a lot harder to connect. The same questions that I get from those investors, how are you going to make sure this doesn't fail, are the same questions I get from those male senior leaders at hospitals and physician groups and health insurance companies that we're selling to. It hasn't posed an issue now, but since I have these 3 events, I had to reflect on it and realize that, like, yes, this is real and this is happening. So now if we go to digital health, what I've experienced as a company fundraising. First of all, fundraising is the worst experience ever. It is very hard. Talk about telling your story and being told no over and over and over again. Or the slow no. Just don't do the slow no. Just cut no. If anyone is selling to you, if anyone is asking you a question, please just end it right there and say no. Do not drag it out. You are not helping them, and you are not helping their feelings. You are making it worse. So I had a lot of slow no's. And with investors traditional, my point was exactly what you said, Sally, which for me personally, I think the shift that we're seeing in investment for women is the questions you get is, how are you going to protect my investment? How am I going to make sure that you're not going to fail? And so the questions that I often get very clearly is have you thought about this? What's your business model? Very basic questions. How are you, if you fail, what's going to happen? What's your contingency plan? As opposed to what my counterpart, my male colleagues would get asked is, I am really, really impressed by your vision. How can we make it grow more? I'm very comfortable and confident with investing in you, but let's just make sure that we can move it like just a little bit further, push a little bit further. And so the questions are very separate with, and I think you described it very well, which is protecting the investment if you're a female entrepreneur versus how are we going to grow and scale this company together. And not until I read that article did I reflect on every single question I was asked, and it didn't matter if that investor was male or female. The questions and perception were the same. Now, I think it's really, really important to talk about unknown bias here. There's a really, really good book out there. I forget the name of it, but it'll come to me. But essentially, it's about this. He's a black teenager here in New York. And what he noticed is that when he was walking down the sidewalk, people would clutch their purses or they would get really nervous when he was around. For no reason, he dressed very appropriately or very nicely. So he started some experiments, and he noticed that if he whistled classical music, people would calm around him. And so the book opens with that story, but then it actually talks about how a lot of our biases are totally unknown. We don't realize that we have these biases. And not only do we not realize, we also don't want to accept that we have these biases. So that's why conversations like this, education like this is really, really important to realize, yes, we're all in this together. We may not know that we do this. Let's just talk about it. Again, don't do the slow no. Let's just get it out there and be really honest about it. Now we're going to go to the dark side, the Silk Road, if you will. I felt pretty good about this. We closed a very successful equity round in 4 months, which is pretty fast, having incorporated in February 2017. Yeah, shoot, man. It was really hard. So that was okay. This is a whole new world. I have never experienced anything like this before. So when I say crypto, I mean Bitcoin, blockchain, and what we're doing, which is we're essentially creating a token. And what that means is you need Bitcoin to power the Bitcoin blockchain. You need Ether to power the Ethereum blockchain. You need Health Cash to power ours. So because we're creating our own token, we're starting to speak to crypto investors that invest specifically in what's called a token sale. Don't go down that road. The thing about crypto is that it's very global. So I'm confused in trying to figure out this world. I can't tell if it's because it's a global world, or I can't tell if it's because we reverted back to the 1950s. So I've done a lot of road shows. I've been to France, I've been to Barcelona, I've been to Milan, I've been to New York City, I've been to San Francisco. So I've been all over pitching our company to crypto investors. And I have never been so discouraged as a female founder as when I have come to these crypto investment events. At one point, this was in Barcelona, and again, this is where I'm confused because I'm not sure if this is like the European culture, but this is pretty much how I dress. I'm a very conservative Southerner, Southern belle, if you will, and I felt really out of place at these conferences. And I actually asked myself, and I called my husband, and I said the same thing. I said, should I have not dressed so conservatively? Because all of the women there, I'm not kidding, shortest skirts, lowest tops that you can imagine, highest heels. And it was really, the reason it was really discouraging is because I saw the money flowing into their company. And that's where it stings. Get pretty emotional. And so that was really, really frustrating because I felt like we've made such good progress here. But then just with this new crypto market, it's super exciting. It's really hot. There's a lot of money, and money flows really quickly. It's just like the .com. You can spin companies really quickly. You can turn your investment over really quickly, and the gains are very high. So I don't know what the behavior is like, but this is totally unacceptable. So I don't know if you guys have noticed this at Perkins and Coie, but this is just something to keep on your radar. But this is super, super surprising. Because it's crypto, I don't think it's going to get out of the crypto bubble. I don't think it's going to get out of the blockchain. But yeah, just not a cool experience at all. So what I've done instead is I've gravitated away from those particular investors and more towards those investors that do have traditional mindsets. In crypto, these are going to be your standard hedge funds, those that were doing traditional investing that are now coming into crypto. So very, very diverse experience here. I also have experience in education, so I've seen women leadership there, experience in healthcare. Just very, very, very interesting experiences. So I'm a very practical person. I'm very realistic. I'm very tactical. So I wanted to give some examples of how hopefully someone here, you guys, can get through that barrier and move up to the top, because we at Digital Health really, really need you there, because we need you on the other side of the table to have these conversations. We need you to see our passion. We just need a more balanced room. That's all, just a more balanced room. Not asking for a lot. So a couple of tips that I've gathered over my career to get to the top, to move up quickly or just move up in general. One thing that I heard from Tim Ferriss is do pre-work for your interview. So if you know what you should know what you're going in for. You should do some research on the position. Take a stab at what you think you're going to be doing. Or if you're moving into a completely new role, show them an example of something that you've done before. So what I did when I went to Yale, I had never worked in a hospital before. I worked at a community health center, academic research institution, and a teacher. And so I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I knew the position I was applying for was strategic planning and data analytics, which is exactly what I did with Teach for America and exactly what I did with Community Health Center. So I brought in specific examples of my strategic planning for my 7th grade curriculum, and I said, look, I mean, I'm not sure how you guys do strategic planning, but I'm pretty sure it can be the same. This is how I backwards plan. This is how I take a goal and figure out how we break it down in chunks, and this is what my plan looks like. We walked through it. And then I gave them my dashboard. I said, this is the dashboard that I created at Community Health Center. I'm not sure if this is what you're looking for, but this is my experience and this is what I can do with Excel. So there were tangible, real examples of something that I brought. I brought a paper folder and a USB folder with PDF so that they could filter through it later. So it's a very real, tangible example of what they were looking for. My intern did the same thing. When I was looking for an intern, there were 3 tasks specifically that we're working on this fall. As soon as we got to number 2, she said, I already did it. I was like, wait, what? We're just in the interview. And she said, yeah, I already researched it and I already found it. And I was like, you're hired. No questions asked. Because that demonstrates that she's excited, she can work autonomously, she can find an answer on her own, and she's self-directed. Those are the exact things that a hiring manager is looking for at any level in organization that you're looking to go. So those are the first 2. Third is quality networking. When I was in college, I thought I just had to meet a ton of people. And so I went to every single networking event that existed. At the college, in Dallas, in Sherman, all over. But the trouble with that is I didn't get very deep in those conversations. So instead what I did when I came here to Connecticut is I really wanted to get it ingrained into the healthcare community. I joined one organization and I became a committee co-chair on that organization and a board member. That is the only committee I'm a part of. That is the only organization I'm a part of right now. And it has proven to be extremely beneficial. The reason why I like that organization, it's the Connecticut Association for Healthcare Executives, is at that time I was working in a hospital, so it gave me exposure to senior leaders, the position that I wanted to be in, and then for me now, it's my clients and my customers. So I can have those conversations about what we're building. I can have those direct interactions with them to figure out, is this what you're looking for? Where are you looking? What is your strategic plan and which direction are you going? So make sure that your networking is quality. A lot of deals, investment deals, business deals, your next job is going to be based on someone recommending you to someone else. We closed our round because of one person. He's an equity investor in our company, and he's an advisor. He brought in $600,000 of our $940,000, all based on personality and relationships. The next thing, if you can, this is something that I learned from someone else that I wasn't able to do, is be able to move around. New York City is amazing. I'm not talking about job hopping. Us millennials get a bad rep for that. Stick with a job for 2 to 3 years, if not a little bit more, but have the flexibility to move around, because that's how it's much easier to go from different titles and to go from different tiers and salaries if you're able to move around. I'm not just like making this up. So I have worked on hiring at Yale New Haven. It is a very, very prescriptive algorithm, and there is only 3% available for salary raises for any particular department. And I actually had a conversation 3 times with my manager asking about promotions, which most women don't do. That was a really uncomfortable conversation. Asking about promotion, and she flat out said, I'm not going anywhere. And I said, awesome. Where else can I go in the organization? And you have to ask. For that particular organization, for Yale, I started to realize a pattern. I don't know if this is true in other organizations, but the people that I saw that were getting promoted had been in their position for at least 3 years or more. Anyone who is a very, very hard worker, self-starter, bringing their work to their interview, didn't matter if they had been there less than 3 years. And so I started to see that there was a very prescriptive algorithm at that particular place where I was working. If you were able to move around to different geographies, that can help you move through positions more quickly. Also, work in a small organization. You can move up a lot faster. Places like Yale New Haven, similar hospitals here, it's very difficult to move up very quickly. If you're in a smaller organization and you're a hard worker, you're a type A personality, they're going to see that right away and they're going to move you up. So just some things to think about when you reflect on your own personality and where you want to go in terms of your leadership. So that's it. So blockchain technology is not a good data storage. So when you hear people say that we're going to put all of the electronic medical records on blockchain and we're going to put Epic out of business, as much as I would love to do that, I hope no one works for Epic here, they're pretty much all in Minnesota, that would be awesome, but we can't do that. Mainly because inherently it's actually a super inefficient system when you talk about data storage, but what it does really well is with small bits of data like a key pair ID, exchanging, it's very, very efficient. So with electronic medical records, what we're doing is you could have an ID for your personal record. And with our key pair ID, because your data sits in other locations, they can unlock access to that data as you move through your care. So with blockchain, we won't put data on the blockchain, which is good, but we can still use that access point, which is a top use case for blockchain. Mm-hmm. So when we started to talk to investors about our company, they always start with, well, we hate healthcare, even though they're healthcare investors. All right, cool. And we hate healthcare because of the sales cycle. And so one of the benefits that I had of working in a hospital and actually looking at curating and purchasing healthcare is I knew how they made their decisions. I didn't quite anticipate so many slow no's, but at least I built our business model so that we could try to bypass as much as possible that long sales cycle. So I think having that insider knowledge, if you will, of having come from the environment, from the corporate environment, is really, really beneficial. And then for me, also coming from the hospital, knowing how slow they move was also very, very helpful. And so we structured our business model so that our bread and butter will always be hospitals. They're larger, the platform is much more robust, it can float us as a company, but when we're looking to iterate really quickly, we're going to go to physicians first or skilled nursing facilities first. And I think that was a really, really helpful experience. Yeah. So, two-part question. I'll start with the first one. Side hustle for a year and a half. Totally exhausting.
Did everybody hear the question?
Could you speak up a little?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the two-part question was, when you started your company, did you start with a team or were you by yourself? And then did you do a side hustle while you were building your company? For me, because I'm a very strategic risk taker, very careful risk taker, that's a misperception that a lot of people have of entrepreneurs, that they think they're these high risk takers, but it's actually very calculated risk. For me, I did a side hustle for a year and a half. A lot of companies will burn through their cash because they spend a year and a half to 2 years figuring out what the problem is and asking their customers before they even launch their platform. So I did that before we even launched full time, because for me, burn rate is a huge concern, which you already talked about. So year and a half side hustle. For the team, so I went through, Lucas was like the third person before he became my co-founder. So that kind of puts that in perspective. It's really hard to find a co-founder. Really, really, really hard. Zach and I started as co-founders first. We had worked together at Community Health Center. We built the platform together. So I thought that this was going to be a great partnership. Turned out it didn't. It's cool. We're still friends. But having that team is crucial. Because if not, you're just in your head and you don't have anyone to bounce ideas off of. So side hustle and team. Yes. Oh, huge. Yeah. So we're based still out of my house. And the two locations we were considering were New York City and Boston. For us as a blockchain company, we're a little bit hindered by, there's something called a BIT license. So I pretty much immediately knocked out New York City. Also, personally, I really like skiing and hiking, and it takes a long time to get out of New York City, so I said Boston. But New York City is just a mecca for digital health. A lot of people will put it in the number 2, number 1 space with Boston. Do not go to San Francisco for digital health unless you like consumer healthcare. If you're more around B2B, B2B2C, then you want to be here. Tons of opportunity. Also, startups, if you're looking to kind of change, because you can also move really fast in a startup. You could do part-time in a startup and part-time somewhere else. If you still want the comfort of something else before you completely transition. But New York City would be, like in Connecticut, it was so, like really the only place you can work at a hospital. It's just very limited. places. You can't move around. Healthcare is very limited as well. It's like health insurance companies, which are fantastic. I'm also obsessed. Or just like a couple of hospitals. New York City, you have so much opportunity, and you are so connected. And if not, there are a lot of companies that are remote.
Yeah.
So our team actually is 100% remote at this point. We'll come together eventually, but yeah, lots of
I
opportunity.
couldn't agree more. There is not another city that I am aware of with the same concentration of hospitals, academic, medical teaching hospitals, insurance, and pharma in this geographic region. So for money, talent, ecosystem, this is the place.
Yeah.
I think. Also hands down, in my case, better than that.